Today we're going to be talking about the least common multiple, in this case the problem 6 and 8. Well, what does that mean? LCM means least common multiple, but what does multiple mean? If it is a multiple of 6, that means 6 can divide evenly into the multiple. 6 would be a factor of the multiple. So, for instance, if we're doing 6, multiples of 6, it's like skip counting. Say your multiplication. You hear multiple. When you hear multiple, you think of multiplication facts. So multiples of 6 would be 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times 4 is 24. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times 7 is 42. 6 times 8 is 48. We can stop at 48. Does anyone know why we can stop at 48? What is 6 times 8? It's 48, isn't it? So that tells us we can stop at 48 because 48 will be a multiple of 8 and it'll be a multiple of 6 because when we're multiplying by 8, 8 times 6 is 48. So let's do our 8s now. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 3 is 24. Well, look, what do we have up here? We have a 24 that's a multiple of 6, and now we have 24 as a multiple of 8. So then do we have to continue all the way out to 48? We already have our answer. The least common multiple of 6 and 8 would be 24. 6 divides into 24 4 times. 8 divides into 24 3 times. So, least common multiple would be 24. Notice 24 is greater than the 6 and the 8. To be a multiple, to be an answer, it has to be greater than or equal to the largest number, which would be 8 in this case. 8's larger than 6. 24 is larger than 8. So, that tells us that it's a possible answer. Just like greatest common factor, guys, last week, if you remember, the answer had to be smaller or equal to the smallest number. So don't get mixed up. This is where students make their mistakes. I see it year after year. Just because it is least doesn't mean you're wanting a small number. You get mixed up with greater common factor because you think it's greater. It has to be greater than the two numbers, which is just the opposite. Greatest common factor has to be smaller than or equal to the smallest number, where least common multiple, your answer has to be greater than or equal to the largest one. Okay? Because multiples, your numbers gets larger. Factors means it factors it down. So do not get mixed up between multiples and factors. Okay, now we're going to do the least common multiple of 6 and 8, the same two numbers, but we're going to do it prime factorization way. You still, just like when we were finding the greatest common factors last week, you factor it down the same way. Well, what multiplies to give us 6? 2 and 3. And they are both prime, right? Because remember, prime, only one in itself can go into it. So there's 2 and 3 that are both prime. So the prime factorization for 6 would just be 2 times 3. Okay, now 8. Prime factorization of 8. 4 times 2. 2 is prime, right? 4 is not, so we have to break the 4 on down to 2 and 2. 2 times 2. So then 8 would be 2 times 2 times 2. Now, let's look. Now it's different than when you were finding the greatest common factor. Now you see you have a 2 times 3, you have 2 times 2 times 2 down here for the 8. You find the one, which one of them has the most 2's, which would be 8, wouldn't it? So then we would pull all those 2's out. 2 times 2 times 2. You take the most, since 8 had 3 and 6 had 1, you're going to take the one with the most and you're going to put it out. Now 6 has a 3, 8 doesn't, so then it's just going to be times 3. So then we're going to come over here. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 3 is 24. So the least common multiple would be 24. Okay? Now, I'm going to do another one. Now let's use prime factorization again. What multiplies to give us 28? 7 and 4. Well, do we have a prime number? 7 is prime, right? Because only 1 and 7 can go into it. 4 breaks on down, factors on down to 2 times 2, which 2's are prime. So then the prime factorization for 28 would be 2 times 2 times 7, which 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 7 is 28, to make sure we're right. Now let's look at 14. 2 times 7, right? So now we have the 2 that's prime and the 7 that's prime. We don't have to break it down any further. Now 14 would be 2 times 7. Now remember what we said on the last problem. You have 28 has 2 2's, 14 has 1 2. So then we're going to take the one with the most, which is 2 times 2. Now we have 1 7 and 1 7, so then we're just going to multiply 7, because both of them had the same amount. So then if we go 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 7 is 28. So then the least common multiple would be 28, because 28 divides into 28, and 14 times 2 gives you 28. So I hope this helps. Okay, now let's look at the LCM of 6 and 8 using the ladder method. So you're going to do it the same way you did the GCF. You're going to make it 6 and 8. Looks like an upside down division sign. Now we're going to factor out a 2. Okay? So 2 goes into 6 3 times. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So now the only common factor we have is 1. So that tells us we have them all. So now we're going to enclose this, and then we're going to multiply all 3 of these numbers this time. That's where it's different. 2 times 3 times 4. Well, 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 times 4 is 24. So the LCM would be 24. Let's do one more with the ladder method of 24 and 36. Remember, upside down division sign. What can go into 24 and 36? Well, they're both even numbers, aren't they? So let's do a 2. 24 divided by 2 is 12. 36 divided by 2 is 18. They're both even numbers again. So, or what else besides 2? Let's look. Let's go ahead and do 3. You can still do 2. 12 divided by 3 is 4. 18 divided by 3 is 6. Okay, now what can go into 4 and 6? They're both even numbers, aren't they? So 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Okay, now the only factor that can go into 2 and 3 is 1. So then that means we're finished. So enclose it in. Now, let's look. We have to multiply all the outside numbers. Now, if we were just finding the GCF, it would be just multiplying these numbers, right? 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 12 would have been the GCF, but the LCM, we also have to multiply the 2 down at the bottom. So we're going to go 2 times 3 times 2 times 2 times 3. Well, 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. Now 24 times 3. 4 times 3 is 12. Carry the 1. 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7. So then the LCM would be 72. 24 can go into 72 3 times, and 36 can divide into 72 2 times. So the smallest number that both 24 and 36 can go into evenly would be 72. So the least common multiple would be 72.